The call came on a Tuesday morning, and I almost didn't answer it. I was on my second cup of coffee, standing at the kitchen window watching the neighbor's dog dig up the same patch of garden it had been destroying all summer. My phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number, local area code. I let it ring twice, then picked up. "Is this Mr. Callahan?" A woman's voice. Professional, careful. "Speaking, this is Patricia Doyle at Meridian Federal Credit Union. I'm calling about your joint savings account. I was wondering if you could come in today. At your earliest convenience." I told her I could be there by 10. She said that would be fine. Then she paused, and in that pause was something I couldn't quite name. Not alarm. Something more like concern, the kind you try to keep out of your voice when you're talking to someone, and you already know what they're about to find out. I didn't think much of it on the drive over. My wife had passed 11 months earlier, and I'd been slowly untangling the financial accounts we'd shared for 32 years. Joint checking, joint savings, the money market we'd opened when we sold the place in Tucson and moved back to Ohio to be closer to our son and his family. I assumed it was a routine matter, a signature needed, a beneficiary form, something bureaucratic and forgettable. The credit union was quiet when I walked in, mid-morning on a weekday, one teller, 2 customers in line. I gave my name to the woman at the front desk, and she led me to a small office in the back, with a glass wall and a round table with 4 chairs. Patricia Doyle was maybe 40, short dark hair, reading glasses on a lanyard around her neck. She shook my hand and thanked me for coming in so quickly, and then she closed the door. "Mr. Callahan, I want to start by saying this is a sensitive conversation, and I want to make sure I handle it respectfully." She set a printed account statement on the table between us, face down, and kept her hand on it. "Before I show you this, I need to ask, are you aware of any large withdrawals made from your joint savings account in the past 18 months? I thought about it. My wife had handled most of the banking toward the end. Her name was Roberta, Berta to anyone who knew her, and even when the illness made everything harder, she'd kept careful track. That was her nature, every receipt in a folder, every statement filed by month and year in a cabinet in the hallway. "Not that I know of," I said. "I haven't been paying close attention, honestly. It's been a hard year." She nodded slowly. Then she turned the paper over. I looked at the balance, looked again. Then I looked up at her. "That can't be right." She opened a manila folder. "The current balance in your joint savings account is $4,211.18. She slid a second sheet across the table. 18 months ago, the balance was $287,000. I heard myself make a sound that wasn't quite a word. "Mr. Callahan, the withdrawals were made by the secondary account holder. Your son." "My son's name is Kevin. He's 41 years old. He lives 20 minutes from me in a house his mother and I helped him buy when the interest rates were still reasonable, back when we thought doing things like that for your children was just what you did. He works in commercial insurance. His wife, Amber, is a dental hygienist. They have 2 kids, a boy in 5th grade and a girl in 3rd. Every Thanksgiving they host. Every Christmas Eve we do. We had a good relationship. I thought we had a good relationship. He was added to the account when Berta got sick. She'd asked me to call the credit union and have him added so he could help with transfers, pay bills if it came to that. She trusted him completely. I did too. He was our only child, and in the 2 years that Berta declined, he showed up. Drove her to appointments when I had knee surgery. Sat with her on days when I couldn't bring myself to go back into that hospital room without falling apart in the hallway. I held him up as proof that we had done something right, that we had built something real. I sat in that office for close to an hour. Patricia Doyle walked me through the transaction history page by page. The withdrawals had started small. 2,000 here, 1,500 there. Then they got bigger. A single withdrawal of $42,000 in March of last year, 3 weeks after Berta's funeral. Then another of $38,000 2 months later. Then a string of them. By last November, the account that was supposed to carry me through retirement had less than $9,000 in it. He had full access, I said. I wasn't asking. As a joint account holder, yes. The transactions were all processed normally, and nobody flagged this? She was quiet for a moment. There are monitoring systems that look for patterns consistent with elder financial abuse. But your son was an authorized account holder, not an outside party. The system is designed differently for those situations. She folded her hands on the table. I want to be honest with you, Mr. Callahan. I noticed the pattern when I was reviewing accounts flagged for unusual activity. Yours came up last week. I shouldn't have waited to call you. She said it like it cost her something to say. I thanked her. I'm not sure why. It was a reflex. I drove home and sat in the driveway for a long time. The thing about betrayal is that the mind doesn't accept it cleanly. It keeps finding reasons. Kevin had been under a lot of pressure. The insurance industry had been rough the past few years. Amber's mother had health issues last year. Maybe there were medical bills. Maybe he'd meant to pay it back. Maybe there was an explanation that wasn't what it looked like. I sat there and built every version of the story that didn't make my son a thief. I built them carefully, and they all fell apart in the same place, which was the part where he could have called me and asked for help and didn't. I thought about my daughter-in-law. Amber had always been pleasant, competent, a little guarded, kept the house very clean in the way that sometimes signals anxiety. She sent birthday cards on time. She remembered that I took my coffee black. I'd always thought of her as a good match for Kevin, because she was organized where he was scattered, patient where he was restless. Now I was wondering what she knew. I thought about my grandchildren. The boy in 5th grade who liked dinosaurs, and had recently become obsessed with competitive eating, which I found baffling but charming. The girl in 3rd grade who carried a stuffed rabbit everywhere, and was, by any honest measure, the funniest person in the family. I sat in the driveway until the sun shifted and the shadows changed, and then I went inside and called my brother. My brother Raymond is 7 years older than me, and has lived in the same house in Dayton since 1987. He is not a warm man, exactly, but he is the person I call when something is real. When Berta was first diagnosed, I called Raymond before I called anyone else, because Raymond would tell me the truth about what I was looking at and help me figure out what to do. He's done that for 60 years. I told him everything. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said, "Don't call Kevin yet. I know. You need an attorney before you do anything. I know. And a financial forensics person. Someone who can go through the whole account history and document everything." Raymond, "What?" "I know," I said again. He was quiet for a second. "How much was it?" "Best I can figure, somewhere between $250 and $260. I have to look at the statements more carefully." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "I'm sorry, brother. That was enough." I found an attorney through a referral from my accountant, a woman named Carol Reyes, who specialized in estate law and elder financial exploitation. She was efficient and unsentimental, and I liked her immediately. She told me that what Kevin had done almost certainly constituted financial elder abuse under Ohio law, regardless of his authorized account holder status. The authorization had been granted for a specific, limited purpose, helping manage household bills during Berta's illness, and the pattern of withdrawals suggested something far beyond that scope. She said she'd seen similar cases. She said the law had gotten better in the past decade at recognizing this specific kind of theft, the kind that hides itself inside family trust. She told me not to confront Kevin before we had documentation. She told me to change the account immediately, which I'd already done the afternoon Patricia called. She told me to start writing down everything I could remember, dates, conversations, anytime Kevin had mentioned financial pressure or made remarks about money. I spent 3 evenings at the kitchen table doing that, writing in a legal pad by hand because it felt more real that way. I filled 17 pages. The financial forensics firm she referred me to was 2 men who worked out of a shared office in downtown Columbus. They spent 2 weeks pulling transaction records, cross-referencing dates and amounts, building a timeline. They found something I hadn't known to look for. Kevin had also accessed a second account, a small joint checking account Berta and I had used for household expenses, and had made a series of smaller transfers that totaled nearly $14,000. That account had been so modest I'd almost forgotten it existed. The total came to $271 and $400. I want to tell you about Amber because she matters to this story. The week after I met with Carol Reyes, Amber called me on a Sunday evening. Kevin and I hadn't spoken since before the credit union called, and I hadn't told either of them that I knew anything. The call felt normal on the surface. She was checking in, asking how I was doing, mentioning that the kids had been asking about Grandpa. But there was something in her voice, a careful quality, the same quality I'd heard in Patricia Doyle's voice, like she was moving around something she couldn't name directly. At the end of the call, almost as an afterthought, she said, "If you ever want to go over any of your financial stuff together, Kevin and I are always happy to help." I said thank you, and I'd keep that in mind. After I hung up, I sat with that for a long time. Was she offering to help cover tracks? Was she genuinely unaware of what Kevin had done and just trying to be helpful? Did she know everything or nothing or something in between? I called Carol the next morning and told her about the conversation. She said it was potentially significant. She added it to the file. Later, much later, I would find out the truth about Amber. But that comes at the end. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes with carrying a secret like this. I still went to the Tuesday morning coffee group at the church hall. I still had dinner with Raymond and his wife on the first Sunday of the month. I still picked up my grandchildren from school on Wednesdays, when Amber had a late shift. I sat in the school parking lot waiting for them, watching them come through the doors with their backpacks. My grandson explaining some obscure world record he'd looked up. My granddaughter already mid-sentence about something that had happened at recess. And I smiled and listened and drove them to get ice cream. And the whole time I was carrying this thing that I couldn't tell them and couldn't put down. Kevin called twice that month. I let both calls go to voicemail and texted back that I'd been under the weather. He didn't push it. That told me something. Carol filed a civil complaint 8 weeks after our first meeting. The day before she filed, she called me to walk through the next steps. She was calm and methodical. She said the complaint would name Kevin specifically and document the full scope of the financial exploitation. She said there was a reasonable likelihood that the civil complaint would be referred to the county prosecutor's office for review of potential criminal charges. She said that stage of the process could take time. "How are you doing with all of this?" she asked, which surprised me because she'd been mostly businesslike until then. "I don't know," I said. "I'm angry, and I'm tired, and I keep thinking about what my wife would say." "What do you think she'd say?" "She'd be heartbroken," I said. "She'd be furious. And then she'd tell me to handle it correctly and not let it make me bitter." "In that order," Carol said. "That sounds like good advice." Kevin found out about the complaint from his own attorney, who called him the morning it was filed. He called me an hour later. I answered this time. He said, "Dad." I said, "Kevin." He said he could explain. He said things had gotten bad financially, that he'd made some bad decisions on a real estate deal 2 years ago, that he'd lost a significant amount of their own savings. He said he'd meant to pay it back. He said he'd been planning to tell me. He said he was sorry. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "Your mother trusted you." He was quiet. "She was dying," I said. "She asked me to add you to that account because she trusted you to take care of things. And while she was dying, and while I was watching her die, you were taking the money she worked her whole life to save." "Dad, I'm not going to yell at you," I said. "I'm done yelling. This is going to go through the legal process. Carol Reyes will be handling my end of it. You should make sure you have good representation." I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a while. Then I went to the cabinet in the hallway and opened the drawer where Berta had kept the financial files. The folders, labeled by month and year, all the way back to 2004. I pulled out the ones from the last 2 years of her life, the ones from the month she'd been in and out of the hospital, and I sat and looked at her handwriting on the tabs. Neat and consistent. She'd always had better handwriting than me. I put the folders back in the drawer and closed it. The civil case took most of a year. Kevin's attorney argued that the withdrawals had been made with tacit authorization, that there had never been a formal written limitation on how he could use account access. Carol argued back with the paper trail with the timeline, with the clear pattern of increasingly large withdrawals that began after Berta's death and continued for months. She brought in the forensic report. She brought in documentation of Kevin's real estate losses, which established that he had both a financial motive and the specific means to act on it. The county prosecutor's office reviewed the case. After 3 months, they filed criminal charges. 1 count of theft from a vulnerable adult, which under Ohio law carries serious weight when the amount is above a certain threshold. A 2nd count related to the accessing of the household checking account. I was not present at Kevin's arraignment. Carol advised me not to attend. I agreed because I trusted her judgment, but also because I wasn't sure I could sit in that room and look at my son in that context. I'd spent 41 years watching him grow from a baby who slept through everything to a man I thought I knew. I couldn't compress that into the silence of a courtroom. He pled no contest. The settlement in the civil case required Kevin to repay $270,400 over 10 years, secured against his home equity and his retirement account. The interest rate was set by the court. He would also be required to complete a financial counseling program and perform community service hours. The criminal case resulted in a suspended sentence and 3 years of probation, conditional on full compliance with the civil repayment terms. He will be paying back his mother's money for the next decade. Now let me tell you about Amber. During the civil case, Amber's attorney, she retained her own representation separate from Kevin's, cooperated fully with the discovery process. She provided financial records, communications, everything requested. Her cooperation was so thorough that Carol initially wondered if she was trying to negotiate a separate arrangement. What the records showed was something I hadn't expected. Amber had found out about the first large withdrawal, the $42,000 in March, 3 weeks after Berta's funeral, when she noticed an unfamiliar deposit in their joint checking account. She'd asked Kevin about it. He'd told her it was a return on an investment he'd made the previous year. She'd believed him, or tried to, but she kept a folder, her own folder, in the same way that Berta had kept folders, with printouts and notes and dates written in careful handwriting. When the civil complaint was filed and discovery began, she turned the folder over to her attorney within the week. That folder, Amber's folder, contained documentation that accounted for nearly $40,000 in deposits that the forensic report had tracked but couldn't fully source. It filled in gaps. After the case settled, I called her. It was a brief conversation. I said, "I know you were in a difficult position." She said, "I should have come to you sooner. I knew something was wrong." I told myself I didn't know for certain, and I kept telling myself that. She was quiet for a moment. "There is no good reason I didn't say something to you." I thought about what Berta would say. "Handle it correctly. Don't let it make you bitter." "I appreciate that you did the right thing when it mattered," I said. I think that took courage, given the circumstances. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "Your grandkids miss you. That part, I'm still working through. Kevin and I have not had a real conversation since the morning I told him to get an attorney. At Christmas last year, Raymond hosted instead. My grandchildren came with Amber without Kevin. We ate ham and potatoes and pie, and my granddaughter fell asleep on the couch with her rabbit, and my grandson told me at length about a competitive eater from Japan, whose name I immediately forgot, and I watched both of them and tried to hold on to the fact that they were innocent, that none of this was anything they had chosen or understood. Children rarely are the ones who earn what they inherit from their parents. Good and bad both. Kevin has been paying on the civil judgment for 7 months now. The payments come through a structured arrangement handled by the court. I don't see his name on them, which is probably better. The money goes into a separate account, and I've decided not to think of it as money returning to me. I think of it as Berta's money making its way back to where she put it. That's the only framing that doesn't make me feel worse. The account I have now is in my name alone, single holder. I reviewed every beneficiary designation I had. Life insurance, the pension, the IRA, everything. My estate attorney made sure it was all updated and documented. I have a financial advisor now, an independent one I found on my own, who sends me a monthly summary and calls me if anything looks unusual. I am not the first person this has happened to. I know that. It happens to people who love and trust their families, who hand over access during the hardest moments of their lives, and assume the best. Because assuming the best is what love looks like in practice. The system is slowly getting better at catching it. Better than it was 20 years ago. Not good enough yet. What I know is this. The woman at the credit union made a choice. Patricia Doyle looked at a set of numbers on a screen and saw a pattern and thought about who was on the other end of that account and picked up the phone. She didn't have to. Nobody would have flagged her for not doing it. It wasn't her job in the formal sense, the documented, evaluated, performance-reviewed sense. She just decided that someone ought to say something, and that she was the one who could. I sent her a letter after the case concluded. I thanked her for the call. I thanked her for the pause before she said the words that mattered, because that pause told me to brace for something real, and it gave me 1 extra second to be ready for what came next. She wrote back, a short note handwritten. She said she was glad it had worked out. She said she'd think twice before letting something like that pass. Berta used to say that the people who show up quietly are the ones you have to pay attention to. She said that about neighbors who bring food after a death without being asked, about colleagues who stay late to help with a problem without putting it on record, about the ones who do the right thing when no one is watching and never mention it afterward. She was right about most things. I have a photograph of her on the kitchen counter, one of the better ones, from a trip we took to the coast in 2018. She's laughing at something off camera, her hair slightly messy from the wind. She looks like someone who knows how her life turned out. I look at it in the mornings while I drink my coffee. The house is still too quiet sometimes. The coffee is always strong. But I know what's in my account, and it is mine, and no one else will touch it. That's something. Some mornings it feels like enough.